Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Welcome to Academy of Medical Educators Grand Rounds. We're so happy that you could be with us today. Um, I'm Linda Montgomery. I'm the Vice Chair of Education for Family Medicine here at the School of Medicine and member of the Academy of Medical Educators. So happy to have you here. So today, I'd really like to welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Jennifer Benjamin. She's an associate professor in pediatrics at the Texas Children's Hospital, which is part of Baylor. As a clinician educator, her passion is the use of pedagogical approach to health professions education using the latest advances in technology. She serves as the Director of Technology for the Center for Research, Innovation, and Science in HPE and co-director for Faculty College at Texas Children's Hospital. She serves as the AI Thread Director for Baylor to implement AI applications within UME and is a member of the Huffington Department of Education, Innovation, and Technology at Baylor College. So she is so much the person we should be talking to us about AI in medical education. We're so happy to have her here. Welcome, Dr. Benjamin. Dr. Benjamin will be would welcome questions in the chat. She will also have a question and answer period at the end. So I'll be monitoring the chat for those questions that come up. We would love for you as a participant here today to be telling us how we're doing with our grand rounds. So there will be a survey. We will have the link in the chat and we'll post it several times. So please do go in and fill that out. Without further ado, thank you so much, Dr. Benjamin. Welcome.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Dr. Montgomery. I am going to share my PowerPoint. Like Dr. Montgomery said, I would like to keep this session as interactive as possible. I was initially going to have a Slido, and then I said, you know what, I'm not going to start by quizzing everyone, but keep this as interactive and with as much participation. So I represent a lot of entities within Baylor TCH. I'm sorry that that QR looks rather skewed in that first slide, but please feel free to scan this QR code. It'll take you to a Padlet with a lot of resources that you could be using well after this talk is over. I have no conflicts of interest, and I'm going to be talking of a lot of tools. I don't have any monetary affiliations with any of these companies. I want to start off with framing this talk around growth mindset. And I'm a big Bob Ross fan, and this is one of his famous sayings: with enough practice, you can learn any skill you put your mind to. And he always says, this is your world, right? And I love the fact that I got to painting landscapes just watching him. And the beauty of Bob Ross is that he got his learners to create the content. And I'm a complex care provider. And the only difference between me and a regular pediatrician or a regular physician is familiarity. And the only difference between some of us that are involved in AI and others of us who are kind of nervous about AI is familiarity. And the need is more than ever for faculty education and development of AI literacy. So feel free to grab that Padlet QR. So this is kind of what I hope to do. Present some objectives, differentiate between types of AI, adopt a theory-based approach, touch very little on prompting, and then spend most of the time on tools that you can use for research and teaching. And almost all the examples I'm going to show is open access tools that should be easy for you all to adapt. Just out of interest, if you were to do a scale of 1 to 5, where do we all, 1 being, gosh, I'm so novice with AI, and 5 being, I'm very familiar with AI and I want to get in the deep with AI, what score would you give yourself? And I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. Just enter it in the chat. Tell me what score you would give with your familiarity with AI. Okay, so we have some threes, a lot of threes. Everyone's right in the middle. Perfect. So this is fantastic. It also guides me with how much time to spend on the frame setting. Okay, perfect. So this is a quote from an MIT course that I took. With the right data and the right model, AI can solve many problems, but finding that data and training the model is challenging. So these are my objectives for my talk. And I'm going to start with this picture of AI dependency and touch on de-skilling. So you can see at the first glance that it looks very impressive, but then on closer look, he's got a hand abnormality. He's got two screens on his Mac computer or whatever brand computer it is that he's using. And then I did a recent search with the exact same prompt with ChatGPT, and you can see it's still not quite there, right? Because that computer is directly on the patient's bedside. The IV lines are all over the place. And then we also have genuine concern about the human loss in decision making, perhaps laziness, and ensuring safety in education. And this is a study from Microsoft. There was another big study also from Google, which talks about how if people relied completely on AI, they actually lost their critical thinking skills. And whoops, I don't know why my conclusion slide came up there. And there is this concern about AI bias as well, especially with our young learners. How do we entrust them with this tool? And I actually generated this picture to say, hey, put down 20 plus 5 equals 30, and it did exactly that. So how do we entrust this with our young learners? So let's start with some level setting with AI literacy and cover the spectrum of AI. So narrow AI, so almost all the AI we've known is this narrow AI. Basically, these are single context, specifically trained. So all of us use Siri, Alexa, those are all narrow AI. AGI is multitasking, where it can work better than humans and it transfers knowledge across different contexts. Now, this is still a conceptual model, but if you look at the latest version of ChatGPT, it's kind of moving from narrow to AGI. And then AI superintelligence is the stuff of the sci-fi movies, and it's completely fictional. So let's cover some basics. We start off with what is AI. AI is when computer systems can do complex tasks that only human beings would do. And machine learning is when machines learn from data directly without any supervision. And natural language processing is when computers can communicate with us with natural language communication style. So that is what you might see in chatbots. And then neural nets are a more specific system where they have loosely connected the GPTs that we're going to be talking about soon, where these machine learning models can be trained with assignment of values, etc., to for image detection, for example. So convolutional neural network or CNNs are getting more popular, and we'll see some examples of those. So these are the different types of machine learning. So basically, you have unsupervised, supervised, and then reinforcement learning. How do you differentiate them? Unsupervised is when they learn by themselves. In supervised, you do labeling of some of the data, and that's how it is supervised. So it has human input. And then the reinforcement learning is, again, when there is a human in the loop, teaching the machine, no, this is wrong. You detected this wrong, and this was right. So that's the reinforcement learning. Okay, so we touched on this some. The self-supervised is where it's learning from unlabeled data on its own. Semi-supervised is a small amount of labeled data. So the supervision is basically the human labeling of the data. And then reinforcement learning is reinforcement learning from feedback. If you all want to get a good grasp of machine learning, this is an excellent article, a little dated in the AI world because everything changes on a daily basis, sometimes even weekly. But this is a fantastic article published in Nature on machine learning. So let's touch on the different types of machine learning. So this is kind of what we know. AI model generates the output. The human confirms or rejects the output. And then AI learns from the human input. And that is human in the loop. And why do we need that? We want to improve the quality of AI models. We want to reduce the errors, and we want to actually increase the deployment of these models. Now you have other two models. So they are called human on the loop and human out of the loop. So human on the loop is when almost like the agentic AI, right? Where we give the command and we say, do this, and AI goes and does its actions. And then alerts if there is an abnormal blood test, for example. Or you can have human out of the loop completely with self-driving cars. So let's actually apply this in a clinical context. So let's take these three variables: fever, tachycardia, poor perfusion, acidosis, and it's all fed into the neural network, which are all these nodes. And then the model learns with all of these three different variables, it's likely sepsis. But what if we took one of those variables and we said no fever, but all the other extra additional symptoms? So then it learns, gosh, it's probably dehydration and it's less likely sepsis. And this process where it learns from the input and alters its behavior is called back propagation. Okay, so I talked about the CNNs. So this is a study that was published in NEJMAI not long ago, April this year, and they taught the AI model to look at a number of EKGs and calibrated for its accuracy, and then had the physician's input in identifying patients with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So what is the big buzz of AI? And I love this slide because you can see how many months it took to get to 100 million users. And the first bar is Google Translate, which took 78 months, right? And then you can see ChatGPT literally took 2 months for 100 million users. So a huge interest because of its potential. So what really happens inside a GPT? So let's get a little familiar with what these models really work, how they work. So you take a sentence, you break it down to text, and each of the text, each component of the text, sometimes even as small as the punctuation marks, as small as the letter, is tokenized. So you break it down into tokens, i.e. you assign different values to them through this process called vectorization. So you say A has X value, T has this value, and that is fed into a transformer, which is basically the neural net that we just saw with the machine learning model. And so when we add a prompt, this is what happens inside ChatGPT. So then you get the output, and then with the output, it learns from the reinforcement learning and human feedback to then improve its behavior. So for example, these slides are from Dr. Mehta, Neil Mehta, and I use it with his permission. So for example, when we look at this slide, when I go out for a walk at night, I love the natural light of Dash. So each of these characters are taken and tokenized. It's fed into the GPT. And now the GPT says, well, it's not street lamp because it's not natural, or the flashlight because it's not natural. It cannot be the sun because it's at night. It can't be the star because it's too far, so it has to be the moon. So it has learned through trial and error to predict that moon is the right word to complete that sentence. And this slide just shows how it works in terms of memory. Within ChatGPT, we know that it keeps track of what you use. For example, this is what it remembers of me. Wants to write manuscript on ethical use of AI. It says it's a PGY1 resident, right? But then further along, it also says it's a speaker at conferences, is the director. So you can see that the reasoning within its memory is not quite there. Okay, so now that we kind of got a little grasp of AI literacy, let's look at a theory-based framework for integrating technology. I love the Gartner hype cycle because with every technology, with every AI you come across, there is this hype, and we then discover, gosh, actually, it's not as good as it's cracked up to be. So we hit this trough of disillusionment, and then we come to the slope of enlightenment and plateau of productivity. And the more we come across AI tools, the more we actually, this Gartner hype cycle, the phases of it, happen rather quickly. So 2 questions we need to ask when we start using technology is, how am I using technology as an educator? And how is my student or my learner using technology? And it is these 3 concepts, right? Replacement, amplification, transformation. Or the learner is passive, interactive, or creative. And these 2 questions are actually the axis of this matrix, which is the PICRAT matrix. So we ask the question, is my technology integration improving my learning outcomes? If it is not, it's replacement. If it is, then it's amplification. And if I can't achieve the learning outcome without the use of tech, then it's transformation. So let's look at the examples of how you can use AI. So the first is a very verbose prompt that I generated using ChatGPT. And I stuck it into Sora, which is a custom GPT. Basically, you enter prompts into this custom GPT, and then it generated this beautiful video, right? Or you might have come across Midjourney, where you can generate images. Now, if it did not improve my learning outcomes, my use of AI is just for the wow, aha part of it, rather than for it really improving a student's learning outcome. Amplification is when I can actually address the mundaneness of a topic. So, for example, this is a custom GPT generated mind map, where it's generated a pre-filled mind map, which my learners could take and differentiate between different types of medications for managing ADHD. This is transformative in that this is a transformation example in that we can't quite achieve these learning outcomes without the use of tech. So this is our custom GPT that we built on teaching about abdominal pain and walking through differentials of abdominal pain. And this is a learner in Taipei typing in Mandarin because they don't learn in English. English is not their primary language. And they are learning exactly how my learners in Baylor learn using the same custom GPT. Passive is when the student is passively listening to the lecture. Interactive is when they can carry on interacting with technology and learn. So this could be well after my interaction with the learner in clinic, they can go add questions into the custom GPT and get responses. Creation is when the learners create the content. So this is a Padlet, much like the resources that you all got during an AI course. And we all entered the prompt, create a photorealistic image of an educator in health professions education teaching a group of students. And you can see how the AI, and we use DALI for this, and you can see how AI thinks that most educators are male. But it also remembered, going back to that memory, although they say that it's still not good, this was a neurologist, this was a critical care physician, this educator is African American, this is an anatomist, and you can see all the props actually aligned with their basic interest. Another example of creation is a custom bot. So this is an open access custom GPT called AI Patient Actor App out of Dartmouth, and we are working with them. It is a dual patient and tutor. So in this, the learner can go in, pick the patient, and then pick their language, and they can now produce a transcript of their exchange, and then come in prepared to clinic. So let's talk a little bit about your tools that you could be using. We're going to touch on prompts really quickly and then go to tools. So with prompting, the 3 C's is kind of the best framework I've come across. With content, introduce yourself. With creation, provide the action, verb, and output. And clarity is that extra layer of refinement. So what is context? Establish your role, your educational setting, and your intended group of learners. And then with creation, use the action verb, create, summarize, draft, generate. All of these are your action verbs. And then with clarity, this is where you provide your extra level of refinement. So set the confines, only look at peer-reviewed articles from these journals. Here is an example of the type of article I want you to generate. That's a chain of density type prompt. So the clarification is when the real work happens, where we keep refining, where we go back to that human in the loop model with reinforcement learning, human feedback. So what are the different types of prompting? Zero shot is almost going, asking ChatGPT, what do you know about this topic, right? So you're trying to explore what the large language model already knows. Few shot is, here is an example of the kind of prompt I want you to, the kind of output I want you to generate. So you provide an example and then you keep following it up. Chain of thought is when you say management of asthma is complex. You start off with tell me what you know about asthma, which might be a zero shot prompt. And then you say, okay, I want you to give me the initial management of asthma. And then you break it down to now go and adapt it to a patient with CF. Now go and adapt it to a patient that also has these other comorbidities. So chain of thought is when you break a complex command into steps that it can then learn from. Chain of density is when we say, this is a systematic review article that I really like in my topic of interest. Go generate 5 other examples just like this. So that is chain of density, where you provide data. And RAG, you may have come across RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, is a build on chain of density, where basically you are providing an external source of knowledge to the large language model to then refine its output. So let's go look at the tools that we want to use for curating and summarizing evidence-based articles. The first we're going to touch is Research Rabbit. So Research Rabbit is fantastic if you are writing a manuscript, you want to look at the whole landscape of the topic that you're writing on. You never want to be the author that they said, gosh, they didn't do their homework. They didn't look at, they didn't build a good bibliography for their manuscript writing. That's what Research Rabbit does. It is an open access tool. It provides the seminal articles. So seminal articles are very important if you are writing, say, in the education world, I'm writing about communities of inquiry, which is a, a very important topic for virtual learning. I want to find the seminal article, i.e., who defined this first. Like the Cheng article with communities of inquiry is very important. You can't teach about deliberate practice without talking about Anderson's work. So you want to find who defined this first. So that is important. In addition to that, it also looks at prior works and derivative works. So prior works is what went before the article, derivative is what happened after. And the neat thing about Research Rabbit is that it will look up related authors. It's super important, especially when we're talking about AI. There may be authors in engineering that publish way faster than we all do in health professions education. It also looks at related topics. What are the downsides to it? It only works well with established articles. So your article needs to be at least a few years old for Research Rabbit to produce its results. The other downside is that there is no transparency. We know that they use the semantic scholar base to provide database, to provide the knowledge to these tools, and accuracy can be a little bit of a problem, and there are ways of workarounds for it. So how does Research Rabbit look? This is how it looks as soon as you go in. It'll say import a Zotero collection. So if you all use Zotero as your citation manager, it's fantastic. It integrates directly with Research Rabbit. So you go put in your title, and then it'll ask you, hey, did you want it in biomed sciences or health sciences? And then you can choose whichever category, and then you add your articles. So in this, I am uploading 2 articles, Techniques for Supercharging Academic Writing with GenAI. And this is, and I'm going to give you a little forewarning about the cognitive overload that's about to happen. So it keeps opening these extra columns, but if you kind of get the grasp of what the tool is exactly doing, it's actually a very valuable instrument. So you never have to ask your librarian to do a literature review or search. You can actually do that yourself. You don't need to wait the 48 hours or however long it takes for your librarian to get back on a topic. So here are 2 articles. There's one from 2023. This one is from 2024. And this is the year of publication. So you can select the number of articles you want to do the search on. And then the little number, the digits below it is the number of citations of these articles. Okay? So you can import Zotero collection. And I already warned you about the cognitive overload that's going to happen. So I have the 2 articles that I picked, and then it's opening one of these articles themselves, right? But further along, you would see that it has similar work, which is like 1098. And then it tells you these are the authors, these are the suggested authors, these are the linked content. Now, how do you sift through those 1000 articles? You use the filter function, right? So this is how you filter. So you can filter based on relevance. And to improve the accuracy of Research Rabbit, I found the more you stuck to the relevance, the better it performs. And you can see that it has similar work, which is very similar to what your article is on. Earlier work is basically what went before, and then later work is what happened after. And you can see it does pretty well with older articles, but not so much with new articles. Now, this little doodle here is a citation mapping tool. And you can see that 2 of the circles are in green, and then a lot of the circles are in blue, and they're all different sizes. The sizes are based on the number of citations, and the number of links to them is how these articles are all related to each other. So remember, I talked about seminal article. This is one way of finding. So if you toggle between network and timeline, you find the earliest article. And you can see that the Freeman article is quoting a lot, and the Deslorey article has this. We haven't highlighted that, but you can see that this has been quoted quite. It has a pretty big size of the bubble, and you can see this one too. So these two might be articles that are worth looking at. And although it was not cited by the Freeman article, it might be of interest to you. Okay, I'm just keeping, thank you for coming. Okay, got it. You all are putting your link. Okay, keeping an eye on the chat. Okay, so that's how, so this is how it's opened up these different articles. Now here you can go add them to your collection. So, and then you can resync it back to Zotero. You can also go share the link to the whole library. So in your Padlet with the pre-work document, you have a Research Rabbit link to active learning. The next tool I'm going to touch on is Elicit. Again, Elicit uses a Semantic Scholar database. It allows you to refine your search prompt with the LLM, with the LLM functionality within it. It gives you search criteria. It provides deep search. It also provides a backup collection functionality, just like Research Rabbit does. It's fantastic if you want to use, say you're doing a systematic review, for your first few articles. This by no means replaces the rigor of a human librarian, right? These models are nowhere near that, but it's really good with amplifying search functionality. So let's see, let's walk through an example. So this is my initial prompt. What are the effectiveness of active learning in UME? Does active learning produce higher scores on assessments of knowledge in UME setting? Do learners prefer active learning to passive learning, right? So this is the prompt we entered. And as you keep toggling on the top, it'll give you different views of what is generated. Whoops, there you go. So as soon as I entered that, it comes up with, whoops, no, that didn't go according to plan. Let me go back. You can see here it's got the steps it takes. I don't know why my slides are not working as well as they should. Let me stop share and go ahead and live demo Elicit for you guys, okay? So I have Elicit right here, and here's my library. In fact, I'll go to recent. And we were looking at the active learning example. Here it is. So this is how my research report looks. So this is how it looks when it pulls up the papers. Now, it's generating this report based on abstracts, not on the whole article. So that's another downside to it. It comes up with screening criteria. So in screening criteria, you can then go say most relevant, most recent, just based on title, and then the screening recommendations, whether to include or not include. And then here it started with some scores for different articles, right? And then here is the extraction definition and what it did. And this is all just Elicit doing it by itself, right? And here is my report. That is what you all saw. So it has characteristics. It has an abstract up here of the different articles, and then it provides the analysis, and then knowledge assessment outcomes, clinical skills assessment outcome, and it's highlighting Peter Borecker, who's one of our faculty, and the implementation challenges. And it is almost unreal how much is possible with one of these tools, right? And here you can see that it'll generate some of these results. It'll actually tell you how long it took for these results, and it's just a matter of seconds, right? Now, on the left-hand bar, you can look at the resources that is collected. So it completed this in 4 seconds. It screened sources in 48 seconds, extracted data in 56, and generated data very quickly, right? So you can see how efficient this is. This by no means replaces what you would do as an educator by yourself, but it augments what you are able to do pretty efficiently. Okay, and that is how you can share. Another way to be updated is a task like this. This is my ChatGPT subscription, where I said I need peer-reviewed publications from all these different journals, and send it to me Wednesday at 8 o'clock, because Wednesday is my admin time, and then I can actually get. So I don't have the time to go look at each of these articles, each of these journals, but it automatically sends them to me. The caveat of using these is that it's getting more and more tricky. Even scientific reviewers find it difficult to recognize what is AI generated and what is not. But those who frequently use these large language models detect the use of AI generated text pretty accurately. So let's touch on using AI tools for teaching. And I want to provide this framework from the IATAI, which is a conglomerate of different organizations. And you might be familiar with AME, AAMC, IMC, and they came up with this matrix, which walks through different levels. Intrapersonal is more a conceptual level. Micro is individual level. Meso is organizational. And macro is larger organizations like AME and IMC, and mega is collaborative networks like the IACAI. This is an article by Buscardin et al., where it talks about the use of AI. And I'm going to so it talks about how educators, if you're not used to, let me stop sharing for a quick second, because this slide shows up rather. It did not animate my my different. So let me go ahead, animate up here, and then let me also see up here. Okay. Stop share and then share again. Sorry about this. It always happens, doesn't it? Share. Let me see if it'll let me share from this slide. It's in my opinion, this article is like, I call it literature gold, right? So this is the article. It's on educational strategies for supervision of AI use in clinical settings. And it has this graph which talks about how most of us have, oh, it shows up behind this image. Never mind. I can talk you through this. So it talks about how much we as educators are responsible for guiding our learners. Most of us went from novice to expertise even before AI was introduced. Most of our learners now have AI that is already happening, and are at risk of never skilling, i.e. never really learning the skills, because they use AI so much. They can de-skill if they rely so much on AI, right? The whole concept of de-skilling and over-dependence and over-reliance on AI. They can miss-skill if they completely rely on AI to teach them their differential diagnosis, their clinical reasoning skills. So how do you then assign how to work with a learner? You can go by defining the low-stake tasks and the high-stake tasks. So a learner might start off with using a chatbot to draft an email. They can use AI scribing for transcribing their patient interaction. But once they need to make that next step of clinical reasoning, which is more high stakes, they need careful evaluation of their AI use, which is the centaur behavior. And then they can probably use a CNN model like we talked about earlier for reading their EKG, which has little evaluation because this model has been trained for accuracy. And so there is back and forth of really careful evaluation and then slacking off some where we can actually assign AI for some automated tasks. And it all depends on whether it's low or high stakes. This is an example of Gamma, where I converted a mundane Word document to actually be a little more appealing to the learner in complex care. This is a screenshot of ChatGPT. So what if we have limited time on rounds and we still need to do Socratic style teaching with our learner? So this is ChatGPT Study and Learn, which is actually available even in the free access version of ChatGPT. And this is my question. I am a second-year pediatric resident. I need to learn about acid-base imbalance in my patient with septic shock. And ChatGPT starts off by saying, do you already know the basic types of acid-base balance? Let me know where you want to start. And the beauty of this is it does the Socratic style questioning with the learner. It tailors them to their level of learning, their level of training, and then walks them through the steps. So let's look at the big picture. Let's do a quick check first. What are the types of acid-base imbalance? So you can see that this learner can go home and continue learning about acid-base balance. And the Study and Learn was released, I believe, in June sometime this year. And it was basically trained for college level education. And it was trained on pedagogical methods of Socratic style testing. And it avoids the whole data dump that ChatGPT sometimes does. This is an example of the voice mode within ChatGPT. So if you go click on this little icon, it comes up with this orb. Yes, failing in assessment, and I need to provide feedback. Can you provide me something?
Absolutely. Giving feedback in a sensitive and constructive way is really important, especially in a situation like this. Here are a few tips that might help you structure that conversation. Set the stage with empathy. Start by creating a supportive environment. Let her know that your goal is to help her succeed.
Isn't that something? So it actually provides step-by-step approach to how you can be providing this feedback. It'll also give you a transcript after this. This is, again, available on the free version of ChatGPT. I actually used this in a recent interview that I did as well for mock interviews. So it has a lot of potential for use for teaching and learning. This is the mind map example of that I showed you earlier with PICRAT, where I'm trying to teach bedside. And this is a pre-filled mind map where I can then take this, give it to my learners to go fill and play with it and differentiate between types of ADHD meds. Has anyone in this group, is anyone familiar with Notebook LM? Have you all come across Notebook LM? Okay, few responses in chat. No? Okay. Okay, few yeses as well. Perfect. If you all haven't, this is a gem of a tool for educators. It is an open access tool. It runs on Gemini, so it's Google's product. And what it is really good at is at providing deep dives into topics. It produces different formats. So we should move away from our passive lectures and actually allow our learners to move along that pick-rat model where they can make it interactive and create this content. And you can also provide the created content. It is free, but there is not enough flexibility with the output. It will not go look up an article that's behind a paywall. You'll need to upload that as an attachment. We know that Gemini is not biased, right? I'm telling that very sarcastically, but knowing what a tool can and cannot do is all part of the responsible use of some of these tools. So how does Notebook LM look? This is a screenshot of when you first enter Notebook LM, and then you can upload your sources, and it comes up with these three panels. So here I've uploaded a source document on lower extremity abnormalities. Now you can also go click on this discover link, and it'll go do a search, just like the Research Rabbit functionality. I've not found that search particularly useful because it goes and pulls up things off of the internet, basically. But you can choose which ones to add. You can add up to 50 sources on this panel here. And then in the middle is the large language model version of it. So you can go quiz. So for example, it comes up with suggested questions. What are the differential diagnosis and clinical assessment strategies, etc. So you can go start typing, and it'll walk you through that.
Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever found yourself watching a child walk, maybe noticing their feet turning a bit, or a toddler with those adorably bowed legs, and a little voice in your head whispers, "Is that normal? Should I be worried?" If that sounds familiar, you are absolutely not alone. This deep dive is definitely for you. Today,
so that is actually an audio-generated podcast with two AI agents talking to each other. All I had to do was to just add the source document, and now I can actually go create a podcast. I can create a video overview. I can create mind maps, reports, flashcards, quiz. There's a lot of functionalities, and that's why I said this is a gem for educators. And it's actually pretty easy to use. This is the video that it generated.
Right. Let's talk about something that's on pretty much every parent's mind at some point, the way their kid walks. From toes that point in to knees that seem of growing up. And that means the best medicine, most of the time, is just your own reassurance. Now, to really make sense of all this, it helps to organize these little quirks into three main buckets. We're going to break down each one so you can get a better idea of what you might be seeing with your child. So the three biggies are rotational, which is all about a twist in the leg bones. Then you have angular issues, which is about the shape of the...
Pretty impressive, right? And it highlights these on, it doesn't have animation, but it has text and video narration. This is the flashcard, which is a new feature in Notebook LM. And you can see the value of this, especially in the UME space with spaced repetition and all of those techniques to help memorize. I am going to quickly screen share Notebook LM and show you how it really is excellent with its functionality. But I am done, and I'll open it up for questions. We have 8 minutes, but I wanted to showcase very quickly, like the mind map functionality, for example. Let me actually go pull up the CAH example. and some of the mind map things here. So this is the mind map. So it talks about the histopathology, history and physical. So as I toggle through this, the middle panel brings up how to differentiate each of these things, right? So then it walks me through what is salt wasting, how do I pick up from hypokalemia, how do I pick up from just non-salt wasting type, what are mineralocorticoid excess ones, which ones cause hypertension, which one cause hypokalemia. So super important for that attention to detail and board prep. And all with just a click of a button. So it has huge potential for use. Now, these are some of the new features where it actually they can go create their own document. They can have briefing document, study guide, blog posts, so many different functionalities. So with my conclusion, AI use should be determined by the outcomes. They have huge potential. I don't think AI is going to replace us, but it's here to augment what we do. And we need to have good AI literacy to actually use some of these tools for research and for teaching skills. And I'll stop with that and open it up for questions. I know that this was such a whirlwind trip of all the different tools. Amy said, hey, cover your 12 tips article and maybe touch on the AME guide. And I said, well, I'll make it as relevant as possible. I know we covered a whole lot more tools in our 12 tips article, but I wanted to highlight something that is more relevant and useful and easy to use.
Dr. Benjamin, I see just one question that's lingering in the chat before we open it up to people just verbally or, I see a couple of questions. So one is, Byron said, how confident are you in the accuracy of references provided by Research Rabbit?
Accuracy of references. How confident are you in the accuracy? That's a great question, Brian, and that's the one I said that it is not as good unless you filter it for relevance. And sometimes I also find looking for a number of citations useful. So yeah, you have to do your due diligence, and that is part of the ethical and responsible use of AI. So yeah, I don't attest to the accuracy of it, but it is good with amplifying your search and coming up with your bibliography for your literature, for whatever manuscript writing that you're doing.
And my only comment is I've had, when I've tried to use AI specifically for bibliography, I have found that there have been articles that are completely fabricated. Title,
Yeah.
I've had to go, you talk about due diligence, you go out to the article, you download the full edition, you look at the page number, and it's a completely different article. And to me, that kind of due diligence suggests that I don't, that's not saving me time. That's not making me a more efficient user or a more efficient worker.
Yeah.
When I think about the use of AI as a tool. So I was just curious if you've vetted any of these for their accuracy, because I would love it if I could hand off that pass. And maybe the answer is, was it Rabbit research or
Research Rabbit is good. And Brian, to your question about hallucinations, I know that was a huge issue when we started experimenting with these tools, but the deep research functionality within ChatGPT is actually pretty good. Its hallucination rates are almost not, I wouldn't say it's completely gone, but I would say it's a lot less than the earlier versions of ChatGPT. although the accuracy of some of these. So what these AI tools are good at is working around the human limitation. For example, within PubMed, if you didn't have your keywords right, the Boolean parameters and the Boolean searches that it comes up with its machine learning can be off, right? So the AI models are good at responding to natural language queries, where you say, hey, I want the latest peer-reviewed articles in this topic. And you make it, and if you did it as a chain of density prompt, where you actually gave it a very good article, then it does a better job. That's how you improve the accuracy and make AI work for you and not work for AI.
Do you have any experience with open evidence?
Yes, I do. And I think it's a very interesting large language model. It has huge potential for use. I actually have slides where me and a learner added the same exact prompt. What is the incidence of fever in PE tubes with recurrent ear infections? And we got different responses. So I think even with open evidence allows scribing now as an AI tool. It has the ability to do that. In fact, it has scribing on one side. It has clinical reasoning questions on the other side, questions you can be asking. And that goes back to that Buscardin article from NEJM that I was talking about the never skilling and the de-skilling, because it's not as good as it's cracked up to be. I'll say that we actually wrote up a manuscript of its use in global context, and it doesn't do very well globally, but it has huge potential. Let me look at a few other.
The next one would be Dr. Nussbaum's question about engagement with copyrighted
materials.
Yeah.
I see
problem with
struggle.
Yeah.
And if I may, I think I'm the only medical specialty whose diagnosis manual is copyrighted. So what I struggle with is med students go and look up the diagnostic criteria and then get it wrong on our exams because the diagnostic material is copyrighted. So that's part of what we discovered last year, and I'm kind of curious about how to fix that.
So the diagnostic material is copyrighted. The source article is copyrighted?
The DSM is copyrighted. And so when a med student goes and looks up an AI list, they get the finer diagnostic questions wrong about schizoaffective disorder. Anyway.
Yes.
I don't mean to wander too far into site question, but Linda, that was the background of that.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Got it. Great question. That is where you use the RAG model to teach it to improve accuracy. So instead of using just a large language model like ChatGPT, I'm really curious to know what your learners used. If they use ChatGPT or if they use something like a notebook LM or a custom GPT solution. And that is one of the things that they also need to know. If the materials, the source documents they're uploading is copyrighted, then they shouldn't really be putting that into Notebook LM. And perhaps an institutionally approved custom GPT, like, and in most cases it's Copilot, is probably the solution in that case. Notebook LM, if you need to upload a document that's behind a paywall, you need to download it and then upload it on a document. It won't go do the searching for you. I actually have another slide where the authors had so much fun with it. It has no reasoning. So they actually uploaded a false document where they said eating stones is healthy for you. And then Notebook LM produced those responses, right? So that's something that they need to know because it doesn't have reasoning like the O3 model within ChatGPT. It doesn't have mathematical ability. Like you can't say, hey, generate this podcast is too long, it's 20 minutes. Generate me one that's 10 minutes long. It doesn't know to adjust to that, right? So all those are downsides to Notebook LM.
There's one question about use of, by Dr. Reed is asking about the use of AI for personal statements or answering interview questions, and has that been a concern? I also am curious how your own institution has approached that.
So I see it as a plus for use in recruitment. Like I alluded to, I used it in a recent interview that I was going for an appointment within Baylor, and I just got that position as well. There are few things to add. The first is to not add any personal information, protected information, FAAP, HIPAA compliant information into a large language model like ChatGPT, where you can't assure, even though you have your settings, your memory settings, all of that tailored to the safest, we can't assure that. So an institutionally compliant large language model is the answer to that. But it can be a huge help for residents that struggle with selling themselves, with putting a good personal statement, advocating for themselves. I would say modeling responsible use. I would actually always say normalize AI use, and then I changed it to normalize responsible AI use, right? So if it generates a 2-page personal statement with a whole lot of false narratives, we know that there's this element of psychophantasy where it wants to agree so much with what you want that it can actually hallucinate. It can exaggerate somebody's ability. So we have to rely on each resident to actually take ownership of what they are putting out there as their personal statement, as their like the interview for interview prep. The voice mode can be a huge help for interview prep for somebody that's training. It's like if you think of it, it's 24/7 help with interview prepping, right? So huge potential. So it augments these processes, but they need to learn what the regulations and guardrails and parameters are.
All right, that's all the online questions. We're at time. I want to thank you so much, Dr. Benjamin. If anybody has any burning questions for Dr. Benjamin, please feel free to email them to me, linda.montgomery@CU Anschutz. I'm happy to get them to her. I really appreciate your time and your knowledge. I wish I had it. Thank you for sharing some of it with us today.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I'll include the 12 tips articles that I was referring to as well in the Padlet. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
All right. Thank you, Kara.